Starts with a P. Ends with a routine. Protein. Good job. So as far as the steroid hormones go, the protein that is produced from it binding to the nucleus, that is going to carry out the hormone's actual action. It's not the hormone itself. You okay with that? So you may want to review the chart and the little slide down thing that I had, prior to the exam. But I'm actually glad that we split up. We talked about that on Friday because now we're going to hit the non-steroid. So hopefully it kind of helps you to separate that just a little bit. So we want to talk about that today. We want to talk about hormone regulation along with hopefully the pituitary gland a little bit. If you have not joined the group me, please do so that you can communicate with Sawyer. Sawyer is just top notch. So please do that. And then remember all the different resources that you have, including things that I have posted. Tomorrow in lab, you will get to meet Connor. He's going to be your TA for lab. He should be able to be at those sessions. If not, I'll try to make a point to get you guys introduced to him at some point. But you'll be communicating with him through a group me. Has he sent anything out by email yet? He's probably just waiting till tomorrow. And how many of you guys are taking lab? Raise your hand. I think the majority of you. Every single one of you? Okay, that makes it really easy. Wonderful. All right. There may be one or two people in there that don't have to take lecture, but they are taking lab. So I did put up that you guys needed to respond. I knew that all that you guys were going to be there, besides one girl that she's actually not in the class anymore. So I counted you as attending. But if you didn't turn it in by 5 o'clock yesterday when it was due, I can't give you points for it. If you have an issue with that, just see me after class, and it'll be fine. I have a little time after class today. All right, that kind of brings us up to speed. We will have classes Wednesday and Friday, and we should be able to finish up chapter 13. So you should definitely be able to do your homework by that time. You have SmartBook up as well. There's another tool called Sharpen on Connect. I'm not super familiar with it, but it is another way to study. We can look at it if you want to. It's pretty new, and I'm not familiar with it, but it's another avenue that you have. Next week on Monday, will we be meeting? What you doing? Yep, so if you come in here, you won't be by yourself because I'm not going to be here either. I might be out eating food or something. I don't know what I'll be doing because the labor love is in the morning. So make sure that you get and get. So for today's objectives, things that we should be able to do. Number one, explain how steroid and non-steroid hormones impact their target cells. So we have a little bit of an idea with the steroid, but we're going to go into more detail about both. Next, discuss how negative feedback mechanisms regulate hormonal secretion. All pretty much except for one hormone, it's going to be a negative feedback mechanism. The only one that is positive feedback is oxytocin. And if you have me for AMP1, we went over negative feedback and positive feedback, and that was your primary example. But to rehash, I'll spend a couple minutes talking about it today. So you should be able to know it for the exam. All right, next, explain how the nervous system controls hormonal secretion, because that's going to be primary through the posterior pituitary gland. We'll talk about that. Next, describe the anatomical locations of the anterior and posterior lobes of the pituitary gland and the hormones that each secretes. We kind of talked about this a little bit when we were together last. I said that only 2 were secreted from the posterior pituitary. I think there's 6 from the anterior. 7 from the hypothalamus. So those are your major areas that hormones are going to be secreted. Now, think about it. Anterior and posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. Which one is going to be the front? The anterior or posterior? The anterior. Posterior is going to be in the back, and you will be labeling that in lab, Lord willing, tomorrow. All right. Describe the actions of the hormones that the pituitary gland secretes, including their contributions to homeostasis. So we are going to start on this today, and we're going to be continuing it through the rest of the week. And also to be continued, explain how the secretion of each pituitary hormone is regulated. So some of them are more specific than others. We know more about some than others, so we'll be continuing on with that. So moving from the steroid to non-steroid. And also, I can't emphasize enough, I need you to think about something. Steroid hormones are what based as far as macromolecules go? Lipid based. Lipid based. So are they polar or non-polar? Non-polar. All right, so get that in your head. Steroid, lipid, non-polar. Don't get non-polar confused with non-steroid. All right? That's why I'm doing this. All right, so now we're moving on to non-steroid. Non-steroid are primarily amino acid or protein based, and they are water soluble and they are polar. Okay, so keep those two straight. I don't want you to be confusing the nons. All right. Okay. So non-steroid hormones, they cannot penetrate the lipid bilayer of cell membranes. That makes sense, right? They're not lipid based. Like, don't like, non-like. You know what I'm trying to say. So it's not going to be able to go straight down through as a steroid is able to. So what they have to do is bind to their specific receptor on the target cell membrane. So we have what here, this is unique to the non-steroid. We have a first messenger and a second messenger. So we say that we use a second messenger system. I'm not going to go into grave detail. You will learn much more in microbiology and upper level courses where you're looking at the physiology of the cell. All right, so the hormone itself, it's going to be the first messenger, right? It was released and it is sending the first signal to the target cell. Once it gets there, it is going to bind to its receptor. And from there, the hormone's effect is going to be completed through the second messenger. Many and most of our hormones use cyclic adenosine monophosphate, or CAMP. This should actually look kind of familiar to you. If you just take this piece right here, what does that look like? AMP looks kind of like ATP. All right, so that's going to be a part of this. We're going to see in its mechanism pretty soon that ATP is going to induce changes. So we change from ATP, we take off a couple of phosphate groups. So instead of it being adenosine triphosphate, it's adenosine monophosphate. All right, so that's kind of where that comes into be. But we use the CAMP, second messenger system. All right, signal transduction. If you think about something being transduced, and it's a signal. So this is the entire process of chemical communication, and we're starting from the outside of the cell, right? The hormone is going through the bloodstream, and he's going to bind or he's going to go inside, and that is going to transduce communication from one entity to the other. And that's the same for steroid and non-steroid. Now, the entities are what is different. All right. Now, for the non-steroid hormones, I want you to think about this. The effect is going to be much quicker than a steroid hormone. That should make sense. With the steroid, it had to go in and bind to its receptor. And then we're not easily just, ping, ping, pong, and then get an action. What we have to do, we have to bind, and then what do we have to create? mRNA. And then we got to travel all the way to the ribosome. And then we got to wait for that process. And then we have to wait for enough protein to be produced to actually induce a high enough of an effect for the hormone to actually take action. So this system is going to be much faster. And then I just gave you two examples. I gave you norepinephrine and oxytocin. By the way, did you guys get my announcement message on Friday? Thank you for actually saying that last week. So norepinephrine and epinephrine, they are very unique. They are both hormones. I told you I thought we were, and I had to look it up. So they are both hormones, and they are also neurotransmitters. It just depends on how they're being released. So thank you for saying that. You are absolutely 100%. Yep. All right. So are we curious how the non-steroid hormone works? Just say yes. All right. So just kind of like I did for the steroid hormones, because I think this helps. Remember, we are using the CAMP pathway. Not all of them use this, but this is very common. So this is the pathway we're studying to get its general effect. So we start off with an endocrine gland. It is going to secrete a non-steroid hormone. Now, is it non-polar? No, it is polar. And so is it going to be able to go right through the cell membrane? No, because it is not made of lipids. All right, so the blood carries the hormone molecules through the body. Oh, he found his site. All right, so the hormone is going to combine with its receptor site, which we can see right here at number 1. Remember, the hormone is the first messenger. So he is going to bind. Is that going to induce a change? Yes, it is. So he combines with the receptor on the membrane of the target cell. And that is going to activate a specific type of protein. This is called a G-coupled protein. There are different types of coupled proteins. This particular cycle uses a G-coupled protein. That's all you need to know right now. If you want to know more, just ask me later. Or you probably ask, him in the back because you probably are very familiar with this, aren't you? Yeah, that's what I thought. All right. So from there, that G-coupled protein is going to be activated. We're keeping this kind of basic. And then adenylene cyclase molecules are then activated from that. So you can see we're going from 2 to 3 up to adenylene cyclase. And from there, adenylene cyclase is going to convert, as I was talking about earlier. This ATP, it is going to be converted into cyclic AMP. When we're talking about cyclic, it's changing the molecular structure of it. So it's into a cyclic form instead of more of a linear form, I'm assuming. All right, CAMP is now our second messenger molecule. Now, depending on the hormone, it may have one or more steps. It's like a domino effect where we're activating until we get to our final product. So we just say in general that CAMP is going to activate protein kinases. The end of that is an ACE. What does ACE mean? Perfect. It is an enzyme. So it has to be activated in order for it to work. And so it kind of goes through a series as we're going on down. So the protein kinases activate protein substrates in that cell that is eventually going to change a molecular process and give us the product. That product is what is actually going to induce the hormone's effect. So you have to keep in mind, no matter what type of hormone it is, it's not really that hormone that's directly interacting with something. In most cases, it's a system that's occurring. We're either creating proteins with a steroid hormone, or we're activating different kinases to get to our end product, which may just be the activation of something. Does that make sense? All right. So because this is a little bit complicated, I actually got a different chart for you. And I tried to kind of circle or highlight different pieces of it. Again, this is just another chart to look at, but trying to emphasize major things that you need to understand. Now, for your exam, am I going to make you write it out? I can't. It's multiple choice. But I can tell you, those of you that have me know this, usually at the end of the exam, I will give you one question at the end. It'll be like number 51 or 52, because the rest of them are multiple choice. And it's optional, because I only count about 50. But I'll say, explain a process that I did not include on the exam. Could you explain something like this if it's not included? Absolutely. But I will ask different questions about this. So what I want you to do at this time, I do this occasionally, we're going to turn and talk, pair share, all right? So you can get with at least 2 people, 2 or 3, not 4, and turn and talk to somebody, and I want you to explain how steroid and non-steroid hormones are impacting their cells and basically their structure, their mechanism. So, ready, set, go. This is participation point, so you better do it. Occur. All right, which one uses a second messenger? Have to bind to it. How are our cell membrane? Steroid hormones. Why? Through the blood by himself freely. Steroid hormones. What about the non-steroid? What do they need? They need some sort of transporter. Usually it's going to be a plasma protein. All right, I want you to think about the cell membrane. Which one is going to be able to easily cross through the cell membrane? Steroid hormones. Why? Very good. They are lipid-based. They were derived from cholesterol. And so how are our non-steroid going to be able to slip in through that plasma membrane? Has to have some sort of transport, so it is going to have to bind to its specific receptor. If it's not available, we're not going to have a hormonal action occur. All right, which one uses a second messenger? Non-steroid. Which one uses a G-coupled protein? Non-steroid. All right. How about the time that it takes? Which one is going to be a shorter time? It's all right. Non-steroid, and why? What does it not have to do? It's not going to have to go through central dogma from DNA to RNA to protein in order to have its action occur. Now, with the second messenger system, like I said, there could be a number of kinases that it has to go through to get to the end product. It's just going to be dependent on the hormone. That's out of the scope of this course. I just need you to understand the mechanism, how both of them work, and understanding its structure is going to help you with that. Do we feel pretty good right now? All right, you should get some practice with your homework and with Sawyer. Uh-huh. All right. All right. Thinking about hormones. All right. Can hormones be a good thing if we need them? If we're deficient? Yep. Can they also be abused? Yes, they can. Don't do it. You'll get caught. All right, or you'll die. All right, so steroids. So they're used to increase muscular strength in some cases. That can be helpful, just like I explained to you guys with prednisone. That can be helpful when you have an injury. You know, it can help with the anti-inflammation, but it also helps to bring things in to build back that muscle where it's been torn, broken, whatever. Steroids can also be helpful. I've heard of, it's actually been used a lot more with different conditions where there's respiratory dysfunction. It can help to build back those structures so that people are able to breathe better. All right. Now, it does have some harmful effects, so we got to be really cautious with them. For one, especially when people are abusing them in different ways with athletics, it can decrease the natural concentration of testosterone. That's for both males and females. You're going to see it more in males, though. All right, it can stunt growth, cause male breast development. This is all dependent on which one you're using. Male sexual characteristics in females, damage to the kidneys, liver, heart, increased LDL. What's LDL? Yeah, the bad cholesterol. So it's going to be low density lipoprotein. It's what basically is going to aggregate in your arteries and cause atherosclerosis, and you don't want that. All right, it can also induce psychiatric problems. You may have seen that if you saw someone that's been on steroids for a long period of time. Now, the major one that has been abused in sports has been growth hormone, or HGH. That just stands for human growth hormone. It's definitely used to enlarge muscles. Does it have negative effects? Yeah, you may get your muscles, but you may lose some other things, which we're not going to talk about in here. Anyway, so it can induce heart disease as well as diabetes. It changes the molecular structure of things that's floating around in your blood. And then it can also induce acromegaly. Anybody remember what acromegaly is? We talked about it in AMP1. What did you say, Gabe?
It's large finger.
Yep, very good. It causes excess growth. You can see it, it's gigantism in children. Of course, that's not from steroids being induced, I would hope. That's just a hormonal imbalance. It's a genetic defect. It can be a genetic defect with acromegaly in adults, but a lot of times you would think, oh, this would be great for a basketball player, right? They've got big hands, you can grapple the ball, they're super tall. Yeah, it sounds great, but think about it. If you're having every area of the body grow, especially where there's muscle, is your heart a muscle? That's going to be enlarged. Is that dangerous? Yes. There have been many people that didn't realize that this was a condition that they had, and they've fallen over dead because they have overexerted and their heart can't handle it. So we have to be really careful. And this can be induced from steroids. Another caution that we need to take. What else do I want to say about that? Oh, also, think about it. Growth hormone. How are you going to get it in your body? You shoot it up. Can that cause blood clots? Is that dangerous? Yeah, that can kill you too. Don't do it. All right, unless it's absolutely necessary. It can be used. I had a student that was actually a dwarf. I haven't seen him this year, but I had him 2 years ago. And he came to my office and he actually talked about how he had growth hormone. It is extremely expensive, but he was very short. He had a genetic defect. And so they gave him growth hormone, but he said by the time he was done, I think he had them have him grow about 10 inches. And it costed the amount that it would to buy a new house. It's very expensive. It also has different potential side effects. He said that he was fine. I'm very glad for him. And now, he just looks like a normal male. But anyway, we do have to be careful. Sometimes it can be helpful. It's very expensive. Now, erythropoietin. If you look at that picture, does that ring a bell to anybody? Very good. Lance Armstrong. All right. He took erythropoietin. So this is used to increase the number of RBCs and thus oxygen delivery to muscles. Why would this be helpful in a bicycle race? Are you using a lot of energy? Yeah? Does it take oxygen? And does it take ATP? Absolutely. So if we can increase, erythropoietin is a hormone that's going to stimulate red blood cell production. If we have more red blood cells, we can carry more oxygen to the muscles. So if we're doing that, are we gonna, and we need oxygen in order to create glucose and all kinds of things like that. Is that gonna help you in a bicycle race? Yeah. Now, is erythropoietin naturally produced by the body? So here's the thing. It was really hard to tell for a while if someone was using erythropoietin and injecting it. Why? It's no different than what your body is actually producing. Now we have different ways because we understand all the different things. But he was known to be sitting in his car before a race and injecting erythropoietin. Now he has come clean and everything, but he is no longer allowed to even do the run-of-the-mill bicycle races from the last thing that I read, just because of the havoc that it caused. And I think it's also to just kind of set the precedent for nobody else to be doing anything like that. It's not fair. It's cheating. Not cool. Anyway, now, can this be used as a good thing? Absolutely. All right, so it's used to treat certain forms of anemia. Anemia can be a variety of different things. It can be due to genetic defects. It can be iron deficiency. It can be folate deficiency. Any deficiency where that specific micronutrient is necessary to create red blood cells, or with hemoglobin, anything like that. It can also be hemoglobin deficiency or red blood cell deficiency, a lot of different things. So erythropoietin can be helpful for that. But unfortunately, it does have potential consequences. It could lead to heart attack and it could lead to death. Now, we are getting better and better, as time goes on and as studies go on, at being able to control the amount and also being able to watch for signs of a side effect beginning to occur. So we can usually take care of it. But we always have to know what the risk is. You have to decide if the risk outweighs the benefit. All right. This was kind of extra information, but you should understand those two hormones on there. All right. This is absolutely extra stuff. Do you remember talking about autocrine and paracrine secretions? Autocrine induces an effect on what? Self. Paracrine induces an effect on my neighbor. All right. So one of the paracrine secretions is prostaglandins, and you may have heard of that before. We'll actually talk about it in the reproductive system. It actually helps to get sperm up into where it needs to go to get to the egg. But anyway, this can be induced by things like injury, tissue damage, and also hormonal fluctuations, which is what we'll talk about then. But they are very potent, and they are rapidly inactivated after use, which can be a good thing. But they have a wide variety of effects. They affect smooth muscle. They can stimulate or inhibit secretion of other hormones. They regulate blood pressure and control movement of water and sodium in the kidneys. Now, what did I have bolded here? They promote inflammation. That's like the major effect that they are known for. And basically every single inflammatory process, you're going to see prostaglandins. Now, what do we do to counteract that? Anti-inflammatories. Anti-inflammatories can be good in some cases, but really, so I'm going to go off on a little side note. So some of you guys know I had plasma injected into my foot. I'm not allowed to be on any anti-inflammatory right now. Because if you remember, all of you have studied this for AMP1. When bone is broken or just in the bone formation process, their inflammation is absolutely necessary. Because inflammation is going to be heat, it's going to increase blood flow to the area because you want nutrients to come in, and then you're going to form a soft callus and then a hard callus. So when he injected my plasma, he induced an acute injury there. We wanted inflammation, and my foot definitely swelled. I had to be off my foot for a while. Pretty big. But anyway, we wanted that because that means that I'm getting all the nutrients there to hopefully seal the crack. And if I took an anti-inflammatory, is that going to cut that down? Absolutely. It's going to cut down on that process, and we didn't want that. So really, some inflammation, you all need to know this for especially exercise science, some inflammation is good. Now, do we want it overbearing to where it's causing a great amount of pain because it's squeezing the nerves and aggravating them? No, that's not very comfortable, but some is good and some is necessary. All right, that's enough on that. Do we have any questions about anything that I've talked about so far? Steroid, non-steroid, prostaglandins, certain hormones and their effects and dangers. All right, let's keep moving. All right, let's look at kind of control of hormonal secretions. Secretion has to be precisely regulated, so our body stays in what? Homeostasis. Good. All right, so it's going to be primarily controlled by negative feedback mechanisms, as I said. Now, the effects can be very short-lived, or they can last for many days. It depends on which mechanism that we're looking at, if it's something in the blood or if it's something with a steroid or a non-steroid. It really just depends on the hormone. All right. Hormones and their products going through the processes that we talked about can be broken down by enzymes. These are primarily coming from the liver to stop their effects. All right, now Stefan, what do you think about something? What did I say earlier? Depending on the hormone and what's being taken in the concentration, it could induce what? Kidney damage, and also could induce liver damage. Why? Kidneys, what are they doing? They're filtering. They're filtering for us, and they're determining what goes out as waste. Are you going to wear them out if you are constantly putting things that's got to do an increased amount of filtering? Absolutely. And the liver, what's it known for? What's one of those things that it does? Detox. Are you going to wear it out if it's constantly having to produce enzymes? Absolutely. That's partially. It's the same type of thing with some conditions in type 2 diabetes. People are constantly bringing all that high sugar into their vessels. Are they wearing out their pancreas, having to create insulin all the time? Yeah, absolutely. All right. Now, some of the hormones and their products are going to be excreted in the urine after they have exerted their effects. Again, just depends on which one we're talking about and how it's going to be able to be broken down. So over here, this chart, it's just kind of going through the feedback mechanism because we need to regulate those hormonal levels. If it's too high, we're going to essentially go through a negative feedback mechanism where we're going to bring it down. If it's too low, same type of thing. So we have some sort of stimulus, being the hormone that's going to be released, and then receptors are going to receive that signal, be notified. It goes to the control center. We have the effect, and then the response. It should be very familiar to you. Whether it's positive or negative feedback, it is the same loop. We have the stimulus, the receipt of it, control center, effect, product. All right, and hopefully it's going to bring us back into homeostasis because that's where we need to be able to survive. Is there always flux though? Yeah, because we're always going to have environmental stimuli impacting us. All right, we have, I'm a little ahead of myself. All right, look at the negative feedback mechanism. So this is just a reminder. So this is where rising levels of a hormone is going to eventually lead to a decrease in that hormone. So we rise and we come to its effect, and then those products are going to shut down that system so that we can stay right at bay where we need to be. So as a hormone is used up, inhibition stops, and the secretion is going to begin again. It's just a cycle, and that's where we can see it right here. Now that's negative feedback. Positive feedback is a bit different. Now, we don't want to think negative and positive as in bad and good. They both are good, but they have their place. So with positive feedback, this is a mechanism where the rising level of a hormone actually doesn't go in the opposite direction. We eventually will get there, but where a rise leads to a rise, which leads to a rise until we come to the culminating event. And then we're going to be set back all the way to the beginning. So, great example of that is going to be a baby being born. Another one is just whenever you get a cut, your body is going to, platelets are going to be sending out signals. Those signals bring in more platelets. And then guess what? If we haven't clotted, then guess what they're going to do? They're going to send out more signals. And so more platelets come in. So we increase until we have a clot. And then we're done. With the baby, all right, so when the baby starts to come out, it causes a stretch at the cervix. With that stretch, the hypothalamus is going to say, there's something going on down there. There's stretch. We got to get something out. So then it releases oxytocin from the posterior pituitary gland. Oxytocin is going to go down as trophic hormone, and it's going to induce its effect, and it's actually going to cause a contraction of the smooth muscle. So then if the cervix stretches more, what's going to be released more up here? Oxytocin. So we keep going and going and going until, yay, baby, he's out, all right? And then that stops the process. I know I was much more happy than the mother probably feels, but anyway, we're not talking about that right now. We're just talking about the positive feedback mechanism. So this is very rare. Again, oxytocin is your hormone to think of for positive feedback. Every single other one that I can think of that you're going to have on your exam is going to be negative feedback. Questions about positive and negative feedback? This should be hopefully a review. All right, we have 3 primary negative feedback controls with regards to the endocrine system. One is going to be at the level of the hypothalamus. So he's going to be controlling the release of anterior, we're talking about anterior right now, all right? Anterior pituitary hormones. And then those pituitary hormones are going to induce their effects that control other glands. That's the majority of the anterior pituitary hormones. Now look over here at this chart. So once we get a high enough secretion of the hormones coming from the anterior pituitary, what are they going to do? Come back and shut down the hypothalamus. And then it can happen at this level too. When the peripheral endocrine gland, after it's stimulated by the anterior pituitary, its products are also going to help shut down the hypothalamus so that we stay within that normal range. We don't want to go all the way to the left or all the way to the right. And then there are different, I looked it up right before I came. I think there are 5 different trophic hormones coming from the anterior pituitary. Now, trophic has different meanings depending on if you're talking about trophic with regard to a plant or trophic with regard to hormones. But in this case, if you guys remember the adrenocorticotropic hormone, I mentioned that. It's okay if you don't know it. It induces an effect on the adrenal gland for cortisol to be released. So if it's a trophic hormone, it is going to have an effect on another endocrine gland. That's just what that means. Not all of them have it in their name, but that was an example. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, affects the thyroid. So it is another trophic hormone. All right, so negative feedback control, number 1, is at the hypothalamus. Yay. Number 2 is going to be at the nervous system. So the nervous system is actually directly able to stimulate some glands to secrete their hormones, and this is going to be via nervous impulses. Now, this is primarily talking about the posterior pituitary gland. We'll get into this more so in a little bit, but just as, I guess, a little bit of pre-teaching. The anterior pituitary gland is actually going to produce its own hormones and release them. The posterior does not. The posterior pituitary gland, it stores and releases oxytocin and ADH, which is antidiuretic hormone. We can also call that vasopressin. All right, so the hypothalamus produces those hormones. They're released through the bloodstream, but the posterior pituitary does not release until the nervous system is activated. So nervous stimulation is what causes the release of oxytocin and ADH. So that's a little bit, we'll get more into it. But that's where you can see the hypothalamus has control, and also the nervous system is going to have some control. And the third is going to be changes in composition of the internal environment. So thinking about this, changes of a specific substance already within the bloodstream can induce hormonal release from another endocrine gland. So it's going to either stimulate or inhibit the secretion of certain hormones. So I gave you guys a couple of examples when we were together last. Calcium is one of those. If calcium is high, too high or too low, we're going to have either parathyroid hormone or calcitonin that's going to be released. And then another one is going to be glucose in the bloodstream. Too high or too low, we're going to either get insulin or we're going to get glucagon. Not necessarily in that order. I wasn't thinking about correlating it, but that gives you an idea. So this is changes in composition of the internal environment. So the main three negative feedback control mechanisms are A, all the way up at the hypothalamus. It can be at the nervous system or the composition of substances that are within the blood. We following? Picking up what I'm putting down? All right, keep it up. All right. Which hormone is involved in the contraction of the uterus at childbirth? Oxytocin. Great job. All right. What are we sitting at? 142. All right. Questions? Because now we're going to start. We've talked quite a bit about the hypothalamus. We'll talk more about him. I would like to start getting into the pituitary gland and both sides of it. Are we doing okay? All right. Looking at the pituitary gland. He lies at the brain's base. In fact, he's right here. He's real cute. See him right there? Now, if you remember studying the bones, do you remember the sola turcica of the skull? You remember that at all? It was a little base. All right. So it actually, sola turcica means Turkish saddle. And guess what sits in the saddle? The pituitary gland. So that's where he comes from. All right. So he's at the cella turcica of the sphenoid. You guys at least remember the sphenoid bone, the bat bone, or the butterfly bone? All right. Well, hopefully you do. All right. So the pituitary gland is going to be controlled by the brain, specifically the hypothalamus. All right. So he's attached to the hypothalamus. You know how I said he dangles, right? He hangs down there. He is hanging by a special little structure. It's called the pituitary stalk, or I prefer the infundibulum because it is fun to say. All right, there are actually 2 infundibulums. We'll get to the other one later. All right, so the main lobes are going to be the anterior lobe or the posterior lobe. These are other terms that you may see. The anterior lobe is also called the adenohypophysis. Yes, that is how you say it. And the posterior lobe, the neurohypophysis. I think that that's hard to say. You can just say anterior and posterior lobe, and we're golden. All right, so secretion from the 2 lobes is ultimately controlled by the hypothalamus. It's either going to be from releasing and inhibiting hormones coming from the hypothalamus or by nervous innervation. All right, and this is just a closer up picture. You can kind of see. Now, even in the model upstairs, the easy way to determine which side is which is A, which is the frontal bone and which is the occipital bone of the skull. And then you can kind of get your direction of front versus back. But also, the anterior side looks much larger than the posterior. And that might also help you to remember the anterior has more hormones coming from it, 6 versus 2. Yeah, I know it looks like a lot of different things, but this is in the brain, I promise. All right, so anterior lobe regulation, hypothalamic, releasing hormones. All right, so we have 2 types of hormones that are released. We have releasing that are going to cause a release, or we have inhibiting, right? And I named those out to you the other day, and we'll talk about them more. But they're going to be transported to the anterior lobe by hypophyseal portal veins. You have 2 portal systems in your body. One is at the liver, and we'll look at that later. The other one is going to be in the brain. Do you see how this is a capillary bed right here? And this is a capillary bed. Typically, you think of you have artery, capillary, vein. And then the vein travels and you go to another artery, right? Well, in this case, you have one capillary bed actually going straight into another capillary bed. We call that a portal system. So that's what's going on here. So we have the hypophyseal portal system. And that's how hormones are going to travel. And these are going to stimulate the cells of the anterior lobe to release their hormones or inhibit them. All right, so each releasing hormone acts on a specific group of anterior pituitary cells, which can stimulate or inhibit pituitary secretion. And we talked about some of the releasing versus inhibiting, and you'll fill them out on your chart. All right, so that was the anterior. Now posterior, as far as their regulation goes. So remember, this is dealing with the nervous system. So we have nerve impulses from the hypothalamus that are traveling to the posterior lobe through the infundibulum, or the pituitary stalk. And this is going to stimulate the nerve endings in the posterior lobe to release their hormones. All right, now we've said it a few different times now. What hormones are released from the posterior pituitary gland? Oxytocin and, we're getting close, it's an A, ADH. And ADH stands for anti-diuretic hormone. We also call it vasopressin because of its dealings with the vascular system. All right. So this kind of looks a little bit closer. This hypothalamic control of the peripheral endocrine glands. So the hypothalamus is an endocrine gland, right? He's just kind of your master up there. And he controls hormonal secretion in a 3-step pathway. First, we have releasing or release inhibiting hormones. I'm trying to beat this into your brains. All right. And these are going to act on specific hormone secreting cells in the anterior pituitary gland. So anterior pituitary gland is the second step along this pathway. And it's going to act on cells in of a peripheral endocrine gland, just meaning outside, to stimulate secretion. Then that peripheral endocrine gland is going to secrete its hormone, which is going to exert effects on target cells. So an example of this, is adrenocorticotropin. Yeah, adrenocorticotropin. So it's going to come down and it's going to eventually act on the adrenal gland. And from there, you're going to release cortisol. And then cortisol is going to go out and have different effects on other structures within the body. So it's one of these pathways. And each one of those spots at the anterior pituitary and then down from our peripheral endocrine gland, that can go back and inhibit so that we stay within, hopefully, within balance. All right, so usually there are multiple feedback mechanisms controlled, as I showed. The final hormone in the pathway is going to hopefully inhibit secretion of both the releasing hormone and the anterior pituitary hormone. So not just going all the way back up to the back, but he inhibits both. And then the anterior pituitary obviously he's only going to be inhibiting secretion of the hypothalamus. He's not going to, he'll just stop releasing his hormone to stop the outer effects. All right, so we talked about anterior and the posterior pituitary gland. Which one secretes more hormones? Which one makes its own hormones? The anterior. Well, then where is the posterior pituitary gland's hormones made? The hypothalamus. Very good. All right, so looking at the anterior pituitary gland hormones. So this lobe consists of glandular epithelial cell. Oh, glandular. So it must be releasing things, right? Glandular epithelium. All right, so its hormones are going to be produced, like I said, in the anterior lobe by 1 out of 5 different types of secretory cells. I think your book mentions those, but you don't need to know them. I want you to know the mechanism. All right, so each anterior pituitary lobe hormone is released in response to a hypothalamic releasing hormone. And then if it's an inhibitory hormone, they're not going to be releasing anything. So these are the major anterior pituitary hormones. Number 1 is growth hormone, or GH. What's it going to induce? Growth. This is especially important during childhood before the epiphyseal plates are sealed at bone, so they keep hopefully growing up and up and up. Then we have prolactin, or PRL. Prolactin, you want to think more of female reproduction and breast milk and things like that.